20 doctors could not make the paralyzed judge walk until the poor black girl did. What if 20 of the world's most brilliant doctors failed to heal a paralyzed judge, yet the answer came from a 12-year-old poor black girl no one believed in? Stay with this story because by the end, you may realize that strength, hope, and healing often come from the most unexpected places. Judge Rachel Lee's name carried both fear and respect across the state. For nearly 3 decades, she ruled her courtroom with an iron presence, sharp in her words, precise in her judgments, and unshaken by pleas of mercy. Lawyers whispered that her eyes could pierce through lies before a word was spoken. Defendants described her tone as cold steel, slicing through their excuses with ease. But all of that power vanished the day her legs gave out. It started one humid morning just after she had finished delivering a lengthy ruling. As she rose from her chair, a sudden weakness gripped her spine. Before anyone could react, she collapsed in front of the courtroom. Doctors were called, hospitals scrambled, and specialists flown in, but every diagnosis ended the same: paralysis from the waist down. Judge Rachel Lee was confined to a wheelchair. Her mansion, once a place where lawmakers and high-profile guests gathered, became a fortress of silence. The judge withdrew from public life, refusing interviews, ignoring friends, and dismissing pity. She surrounded herself with nurses and attendants, each instructed to maintain strict order. The woman who once commanded justice now battled her own private despair, hidden behind marble walls. Yet her determination never softened. If doctors could not solve her case, she would summon more. She spent months flying in neurosurgeons, spinal experts, physiotherapists, and alternative healers. From Washington to Berlin, 20 medical professionals had tried, examined, tested, and failed. Still, Judge Rachel Lee did not give up. She was a woman who never accepted no inside her courtroom. In her mind, this affliction was no different from a stubborn witness. It could be broken, cracked, exposed. She demanded solutions, and when solutions did not come, she demanded silence. Her bitterness grew sharper than her pain. On the other side of town lived Mia, a 12-year-old girl with skin as deep as polished ebony and eyes that carried more questions than answers. She lived with her grandmother in a narrow apartment that smelled faintly of old books and soap. Life had not been kind to Mia. Her father was absent, her mother gone, and poverty pressed against her every day like an unrelenting shadow. Yet despite her world of want, Mia carried something inside her that no money could buy, a quiet gift she did not fully understand. She could sense things others could not. When neighbors fell sick, she sometimes placed her hands over them, whispering in a voice too soft for anyone else to hear. Strangely, the fevers would break, the coughs would ease, and the restless would find peace. Her grandmother told her it was a blessing, but Mia never believed it. To her, it was just something she did, something small, something unimportant. But fate had other plans. Judge Rachel Lee's name appeared one night on the local news, her story told not with authority but with pity. 20 doctors have failed to restore the once feared judge to her feet. The camera showed a fleeting image of her in a wheelchair, her lips pressed in disdain as if the world itself had betrayed her. Mia watched the screen and whispered without thinking, "She doesn't believe, that's why she cannot walk." Her grandmother turned, startled. "Child, what do you mean?" Mia didn't answer. She didn't know how she knew, she only knew. Word of the judge's hopeless condition spread beyond the television. It became gossip at markets, whispered stories in churches, and fuel for the newspapers. Some called it karma, others called it tragedy, but for Mia it became a quiet call she could not shake. Something in her heart told her she would meet Judge Rachel Lee, though the very thought seemed impossible. The bridge between their worlds was too wide: one, a woman of law and wealth, trapped in bitterness; the other, a girl of poverty, carrying a gift no one believed in. But destiny doesn't wait for permission. Mia lay awake on her narrow bed, staring at the cracked ceiling of her grandmother's apartment. The steady tick of the old clock on the wall seemed louder than usual, as if time itself demanded her attention. Sleep would not come, not after what she had seen on television. Judge Rachel Lee, her name repeated itself in Mia's mind like a drumbeat. The proud, powerful woman looked so small in that wheelchair, but it wasn't the image of her weakness that haunted Mia. It was the whisper that had left her lips before she even knew she had spoken. "She doesn't believe, that's why she cannot walk." The words weren't hers, at least they didn't feel like hers. They had spilled out like water breaking through a dam. Mia rolled to her side, pulling the thin blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her grandmother's soft snores drifted from the other bed, steady and comforting, yet comfort couldn't settle her racing thoughts. Why had she said that? Why had she felt so certain? She tried to brush it off as imagination, but the feeling lingered. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened. She remembered when old Mr. Jericho from downstairs had coughed so badly he couldn't stand. Everyone thought he wouldn't last the week. Mia had placed her hands on his chest, whispered words she didn't even understand, and within 2 days he was walking around again, laughing as though death had never come near him. Coincidence, her grandmother had said at the time, though her eyes carried a softness that betrayed belief. But this felt different. This wasn't about a neighbor or a cough. This was about a woman untouchable to most of the world, a woman of power, a woman who lived behind gates so high they could swallow the sky. Mia pulled the blanket over her head, but the whisper still echoed, "She doesn't believe." The next morning, sunlight spilled weakly through the blinds. The smell of fried onions filled the air as her grandmother prepared their simple breakfast. Mia sat at the small wooden table, pushing crumbs around her plate, lost in thought. "Eat, child," her grandmother said gently. "Empty stomachs don't grow strong bones." Mia nodded but didn't lift her fork. Her grandmother sat across from her, folding her hands. "You've been quiet since last night." Mia hesitated, chewing her lip. "Grandma, do you think it's possible to help someone who doesn't want help?" The old woman tilted her head, her silver hair catching the light. "Why do you ask that?" Mia shrugged, just wondering. Her grandmother's gaze softened. "Sometimes people build walls around themselves, higher than mountains, stronger than stone, but walls can't keep out truth forever. When the right person comes along, even the hardest heart begins to listen." Mia looked down at her plate. The words gave her no peace. After breakfast, she walked to school with her notebook tucked under her arm. The streets buzzed with the noise of morning, vendors shouting, children playing, buses screeching at corners. Yet Mia felt as though the world had narrowed into a single thought: Judge Rachel Lee. At school, lessons blurred together. The teacher's voice rose and fell, but Mia's mind wandered. She doodled in the margins of her notebook, shapes and patterns she didn't understand, circles, lines, something that looked almost like pathways. When her classmate tapped her shoulder to borrow a pencil, she startled as if waking from a dream. At recess, she sat beneath a tree, watching other children laugh and chase each other. She wanted to join them, but the weight of her thoughts pinned her down. She pulled out her notebook again, staring at the strange sketches. They looked familiar, almost like the drawings her grandmother had once shown her from an old family Bible, symbols connected with healing, ancient and mysterious. Mia shut the notebook quickly, her chest tightening. Why was this happening now? That evening, her grandmother sent her to the market to buy bread. The sun was low, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. Mia walked slowly, her basket swinging by her side. As she passed the newspaper stand near the corner, a headline caught her eye. "Judge Lee refuses to quit bench despite paralysis." Beneath it was a photograph of the judge sitting stiffly in her wheelchair, her expression hard, her chin lifted as though daring the world to pity her. The vendor, noticing Mia's stare, chuckled. "That woman is something else. 20 doctors, they say, and still no cure. Maybe God himself will have to step in." Mia's grip tightened on the basket handle. Maybe he already had. She hurried past the stand, her heart pounding. That night she dreamt of marble floors and high ceilings. She saw herself standing inside a mansion, her small feet echoing on the polished ground. At the far end of the room sat Judge Rachel Lee, cold and unmoving in her wheelchair. The judge's eyes locked onto Mia's, sharp and piercing. "You don't belong here," the judge's voice thundered, though her lips did not move. Mia stepped forward, trembling. "I only came to help." "Help?" The judge's laugh was like broken glass. "No one can help me, not doctors, not prayers, not you." Mia's hands glowed faintly in the dream, a soft light spilling between her fingers. "Believe," she whispered, "that's all." The judge's expression twisted into rage, and suddenly the floor beneath Mia cracked open, darkness rising to swallow her. She woke with a gasp, sweat clinging to her skin. Her grandmother stirred. "What is it, child?" Mia pressed her face into her pillow. "Just a dream," she whispered. But deep inside, she knew it was more than that. Days passed, but the pull inside Mia grew stronger. Every time she tried to ignore it, something reminded her: the whispers at church, the news headlines, even overheard conversations on the bus. It was as though the universe itself pushed her toward the judge. One afternoon, while helping her grandmother fold laundry, Mia finally spoke. Grandma, what if I need to see her? Her grandmother paused, frowning. See who? The judge. The old woman's hands froze over the sheet she was folding. Child, that's foolishness. A woman like that, she lives behind guards and gates. You can't just walk up to her door. I know, Mia said softly, but I feel like I have to. Her grandmother studied her face, the seriousness in her eyes. Slowly, she sighed. This gift of yours, Mia, it's not something to play with. The world doesn't always understand. They may laugh, or worse, they may fear you. I don't care if they laugh, Mia whispered. What if she really needs me? The room fell silent. Her grandmother finally laid a wrinkled hand over Mia's. If it is meant to be, the way will open, but promise me, child, you will not force it. Let the path find you. Mia nodded, though patience had never felt heavier. The path began 2 weeks later. Judge Rachel Lee, despite her bitterness, had a routine. Once a month, she allowed her staff to take her into the city for appearances she deemed unavoidable: charity events, legal conferences, dinners where her absence would raise too many questions. These outings were carefully planned, guarded, and brief. On one such afternoon, her black car rolled slowly down the very street where Mia often walked home from school. The tinted windows shielded the judge, but Mia felt a strange pull as the vehicle passed. Without thinking, she stopped and stared. The car slowed at a red light, and for a brief moment the window lowered just enough. Mia's eyes met the judge. It was only a second, maybe less, but it felt like time stopped. The same cold steel eyes that once terrified defendants now locked on a 12-year-old girl in a faded school uniform. Mia's breath caught. The light changed, the car moved on. But something had shifted. That night, Mia wrote in her notebook, her hand moving as if guided by something beyond her. Words appeared she did not plan, lines she did not rehearse. The wall will fall, the heart will see, and the feet will rise again. She stared at the page, her pulse racing. It wasn't her handwriting, not completely. In the mansion, Judge Rachel sat by the window, the memory of the girl's eyes refusing to leave her mind. For the first time in months, her bitterness wavered. There had been no pity in those eyes, no mockery, only certainty. It unsettled her more than any doctor's failure. She wheeled herself away from the window, but the unease followed. Something was coming. And for the first time since her fall, Judge Rachel Lee wasn't sure she was ready. The next morning broke with gray skies, clouds hanging low like curtains refusing to rise. In the cramped apartment, Mia sat cross-legged on her bed, notebook open, staring at the strange words she had written the night before. The wall will fall, the heart will see, and the feet will rise again. Her fingers traced the letters. They looked familiar yet foreign, as if another hand had guided hers. She didn't understand what it meant, but she felt it deep in her chest, like the steady thump of a drum she couldn't silence. Her grandmother knocked lightly on the door. "School, Mia, don't be late." "Yes, Grandma," Mia answered, slipping the notebook under her pillow. As she walked to school, her eyes kept drifting to the road where she'd seen the judge's car. The memory of those sharp, piercing eyes haunted her. It was as if the judge had looked through her, beyond her worn uniform, her dusty shoes, and into something she couldn't hide. Meanwhile, Judge Rachel sat in her study. A thick book on constitutional law opened before her. She wasn't reading it. Her eyes kept drifting to the window where rain tapped lightly against the glass. She hadn't told anyone about the girl, not her nurses, not her attendants, not even the security detail that had driven her car yesterday. To them, it was just another outing. To her, it was something she couldn't explain. The girl's gaze had unsettled her in a way none of the doctors had. They had all looked at her with pity, with calculation, with resignation, but the child's eyes, they had held no pity, only certainty. Certainty that frightened her. She shook her head and forced her eyes back to the book. Nonsense, she told herself, just a child on the street, nothing more. Yet the thought lingered like a stubborn shadow. For the next few days, life moved in fragments. Mia went to school, helped her grandmother, and tried to ignore the growing pull inside her. But each night the dreams returned. She saw the mansion again, saw the judge sitting in her chair, saw herself walking closer though the walls seemed to stretch higher and higher. One dream ended with the judge shouting, "You will fail like the rest." Another with the floor trembling beneath Mia's feet as she whispered, "Believe." When she told her grandmother, the old woman grew silent. "Child," she said carefully, "dreams can be doors, but not every door should be opened." Mia nodded, but the unease remained. The next turn of fate came at church. It was Sunday morning, the air thick with the smell of incense and the choir's voices rising in waves. Mia sat beside her grandmother in the second pew, trying to focus on the sermon, but her eyes kept drifting to the back of the church where people whispered and pointed. "Did you hear?" one woman murmured to another. "The judge herself is here today, in a wheelchair, yes, but still came. What pride." Mia's heart jumped. She turned, and there she was, Judge Rachel Lee, wheeled in by a nurse, her presence commanding even in weakness. People craned their necks to look at her, some with sympathy, others with quiet judgment. Mia froze. She hadn't expected this, not here, not now. The sermon continued, but Mia barely heard it. Her eyes kept pulling toward the judge. At one point, she swore the judge looked directly at her. Their eyes met for the second time, and Mia's throat went dry. When the service ended, the judge was escorted out quickly, avoiding the press of curious hands. Mia wanted to follow, to say something, anything, but her legs felt rooted to the floor. By the time she moved, the judge was gone. That night, Mia couldn't sleep. She replayed the moment again and again. Why hadn't she spoken? Why hadn't she done something? She pressed her palms together, whispering into the darkness, "God, if I'm supposed to do this, show me how, show me when." The room stayed quiet, but her heart felt a little steadier. Judge Rachel, on the other hand, sat in her study after church, more unsettled than ever. She had seen the girl again, twice now. Coincidence or something else? She wheeled herself to the mirror. The woman who stared back looked nothing like the judge she once was. The lines around her eyes were deeper, her shoulders narrower, her lips thinner from months of bitterness. She hated the reflection. But more than that, she hated the feeling she couldn't shake, that the child had something to do with her. She pressed her hands against the arms of her chair, her knuckles white. "Ridiculous," she muttered, "utterly ridiculous." Yet the unease clung tighter. A week later, fate finally forced their paths to cross. Mia was walking home from school when she heard commotion ahead. A black car had stopped near the curb, its back wheel stuck in a shallow pothole. The driver muttered angrily, trying to maneuver, but the wheel only spun. Mia slowed, her eyes widening as the back window lowered. Judge Rachel Lee sat inside, her sharp eyes scanning the street with irritation. For a moment their gazes locked again, the third time. This time Mia didn't look away. Something pushed her forward, stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. She stepped closer to the car. The driver frowned. "Move along, kid." But before he could say more, the judge's voice cut through, cold and commanding. "Wait." The driver froze. The judge leaned slightly forward, her eyes fixed on Mia. "You again." Mia swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. The street noise faded, the honking horns, the chatter of passersby, all distant. Finally, the judge said, "Why do you keep staring at me?" Mia's lips trembled, but the words slipped out before she could stop them. "Because I think I can help you." The driver barked a laugh, quickly silenced by the judge's glare. Rachel's eyes narrowed. "Help me, you're a child." Mia's hands clenched at her sides. "Doctors couldn't, maybe you don't need another doctor." The judge's face tightened, the faintest flicker of something, anger, fear, crossing her features. "Get in the car," she said suddenly. The driver blinked. "Ma'am." Now the judge snapped. Mia hesitated only a second before climbing in. The door shut behind her with a heavy thud. Her heart raced. She was sitting in the same car as Judge Rachel Lee. The woman turned toward her, eyes sharp as blades. "You have one chance, child. Speak and choose your words carefully." Mia swallowed, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "You don't believe it, that's why you can't walk." The words hung in the air, thick and unyielding. For the first time in years, Judge Rachel Lee had no reply. The ride to Judge Rachel Lee's mansion was long and silent. The city's noise faded into quiet suburbs, and the quiet suburbs gave way to rolling estates lined with gates taller than the trees. Mia sat stiffly in the leather seat, her small hands pressed against her knees, staring at her reflection in the tinted window. She wanted to ask where they were going, what the judge expected from her, why she had even been allowed in the car at all. But one glance at the woman beside her silenced every question. Judge Rachel's face was stone, her lips pressed thin, her eyes fixed forward as though the world itself owed her answers. The car finally slowed before a towering black gate. Cameras turned, locks clicked, and slowly the iron bars swung open. Mia's eyes widened as the car rolled into a driveway that seemed to stretch forever. The mansion loomed ahead, all sharp angles and cold marble, the kind of house Mia had only seen in magazines left behind at the library. When the car stopped, the driver hurried out to open the door. Mia stepped onto the driveway, her scuffed shoes sinking slightly into the polished stone path. She tilted her head back, taking in the sheer size of the house. Her grandmother's entire apartment building could have fit inside just one wing. "Move," Judge Rachel's voice snapped. Mia flinched and turned. The driver unfolded the wheelchair from the trunk, assisting the judge out of the car. She settled into it with practiced ease, her hands gripping the polished armrests, her eyes cut toward Mia. "Follow me." Mia obeyed, her heart racing as she stepped into the mansion. The inside was even grander than the outside. Chandeliers glittered from ceilings so high they looked like clouds had been trapped inside. Marble floors stretched endlessly, polished to such a shine that Mia could see her own nervous reflection staring back. But for all its beauty, the house felt empty, too clean, too quiet, as if life itself had been banished. The judge led her down a long hallway to a study lined with books. The room smelled faintly of leather and dust, the air heavy with silence. She wheeled herself behind a massive desk, her eyes never leaving Mia. "Sit," she gestured to a chair opposite her. Mia sat, the leather seat swallowing her small frame. For a long moment the judge said nothing. She simply studied the girl, her sharp gaze unblinking. Mia shifted under the weight of it, her fingers twisting together. Finally the judge spoke. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes, ma'am," Mia said softly. "You're Judge Rachel Lee." "And do you know what that means?" Mia hesitated. "You're important, powerful." The judge's lips curved into something between a smile and a sneer. "Correct. For 30 years I've commanded this state's courts. Lawyers, criminals, even politicians, none could stand against me. I built my reputation on strength, on never bending, never yielding, and now," her voice trailed off, her jaw tightening, "now I sit in this chair." Mia's eyes flickered to the wheelchair, then back to the woman's face. "But you don't believe you'll stay there forever." The judge's eyes narrowed. "You speak boldly for a child." Mia swallowed but didn't look away. "Because it's true." Silence pressed down on the room. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Tell me then, how do you, a girl with no education, no wealth, no standing, imagine you can solve what 20 of the world's most brilliant doctors could not?" Mia hesitated, her fingers tightening in her lap. "I don't know how, I just know, sometimes when people are sick I feel something, like a light inside me, and when I listen to it they get better." The judge's expression didn't soften, if anything it grew harder. "Magic, fairy tale-ese." Mia shook her head. "No, just faith." The word hung between them like a challenge. Judge Rachel's mouth twisted, the faintest hint of bitterness sharpening her voice. "Faith, I've had priests, pastors, and healers walk through those doors. They prayed, they shouted, they laid hands on me. Nothing. Do you think your faith is stronger than theirs?" Mia's voice trembled, but she spoke anyway. "I don't think it's about being stronger, I think you don't believe." The judge's hands gripped the armrest so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Careful, child." But Mia didn't back down. "If you believe even just a little, you'll walk again." The silence that followed was heavy, almost unbearable. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner grew louder, each second marking the distance between them. Finally, the judge exhaled sharply, wheeling back from the desk. "You're either a fool or a liar, but for some reason I don't want you gone just yet." She pressed a button on her desk. A nurse entered almost immediately, her face pale with surprise at the sight of Mia. "Show this girl to the guest quarters," the judge ordered curtly. "She'll stay for the night." The nurse hesitated. "Ma'am, is that?" "Do not question me." "Yes, ma'am." The nurse motioned for Mia to follow. Mia rose slowly, glancing once more at the judge. The woman's face was unreadable, carved from stone. Mia followed the nurse out, her heart pounding. She had expected rejection, maybe even to be thrown out of the car before she reached the mansion gates, but this was different. The door closed behind her, leaving Judge Rachel alone in her study. For the first time in months, she felt something she couldn't define. Not hope, not exactly, but something stirring beneath the weight of her bitterness. And she hated it. That night, Mia lay awake in a guest room bigger than her grandmother's entire apartment. The bed was soft, the sheets heavy, but she couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed every word, every look, every silence between her and the judge. She didn't know if she had said the right thing, she didn't even know if she was the right thing, but she knew one truth: she was here, and that meant something. She slipped from the bed and knelt by the window, whispering softly into the night, "Please let me be strong enough." Down the hall, Judge Rachel sat by her own window, sleepless. The child's words gnawed at her, echoing louder than any doctor's diagnosis. "You don't believe." She scowled, gripping the armrests tighter. She had believed in science, in medicine, in human genius. She had summoned the best the world had to offer. Belief had brought her nothing but failure. And yet those eyes, that certainty. She closed her eyes, her chest rising and falling in slow, uneven breaths. For the first time in months, she whispered, not to herself, not to the empty room, but to the darkness beyond the glass. "What if she's right?" The question hung unanswered in the night. Morning came with sunlight spilling through tall windows. The household bustled with quiet activity, though the presence of the girl had unsettled the staff. Some whispered curiosity, others suspicion, but none dared question the judge's order. At breakfast, Judge Rachel sat at the head of the long table, her plate untouched. Mia sat quietly several seats away, too nervous to eat the golden pastries piled before her. Finally, the judge broke the silence. "If you're to stay here, child, you will not waste my time. I want proof, do you understand?" Mia nodded slowly, "Yes, ma'am." The judge's eyes sharpened. "Then tonight you will try." Mia's breath caught. "Try what?" "Whatever it is you claim you can do, healing, faith, light, whatever nonsense you carry, tonight you will prove it." Mia's hands trembled beneath the table. She had healed neighbors, soothed strangers, but never someone like this, never under eyes so sharp, in walls so high. Still, she lifted her chin. "I'll try." The judge leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. For the first time in months, the air inside the mansion shifted. The battle between pride and belief had begun. The night settled over the mansion like a heavy cloak, every shadow stretching long against the marble walls. Outside, the garden fountains whispered, their soft sprays of water breaking the silence, but inside the great house, tension pressed thick and unyielding. Mia sat on the edge of the guest bed, her knees drawn to her chest, staring at the small notebook resting on the nightstand. The words she had written days ago echoed in her mind. "The wall will fall, the heart will see, and the feet will rise again." She whispered them under her breath, as though reminding herself of a promise she didn't fully understand. Down the hall, Judge Rachel Lee prepared herself in her own way. Her nurse had rolled her into the study after dinner, lighting only the fire in the great stone hearth. The flames danced across her face, highlighting sharp cheekbones and lips pressed tight. She had sent everyone away, insisting she needed solitude before this performance, as she mockingly called it. But in the privacy of her mind, she was anything but calm. Her heart, long accustomed to the icy stillness of resignation, beat quick and uneven like a prisoner rattling chains. She hated that the girl had stirred something in her, hated the way those young eyes had met hers without flinching, without pity, hated the question that lingered still: what if she's right? The grandfather clock struck 9, its deep chime rolled through the mansion halls. A knock came at Mia's door. The nurse stepped inside, her expression stiff, her voice clipped. "The judge is ready for you." Mia's heart leapt into her throat, but she rose quickly, smoothing the plain dress her grandmother had washed so many times its fabric had faded at the seams. She followed the nurse down the endless corridor, her small footsteps swallowed by the silence. The double doors to the study stood open, firelight spilling across the polished floor. The judge sat waiting, framed by shadows and flame. "Come in," Rachel said. Her voice was steady, cold. The same voice that once sentenced men to life in prison without trembling. Mia stepped inside, the doors closed behind her with a heavy thud. For a long moment neither spoke. Finally, the judge gestured to the space before her chair. "Do what you came to do, child." Mia swallowed hard, her palms slick with sweat. She moved slowly, kneeling on the rug in front of the wheelchair. The fire crackled behind her, its warmth brushing her back. "May I hold your hands?" Mia asked softly. The judge's brows arched. "Why?" "Because it helps," Mia said. For a long pause, Rachel said nothing. Then, with a slow and almost disdainful motion, she lifted her hands from the chair's armrests and extended them forward. They were cool, rigid, her grip reluctant as stone. Mia clasped them gently, the judge's long fingers dwarfing her own small ones. She closed her eyes. Silence thickened, the fire popped, the clock ticked. Mia breathed deeply. She whispered, not words she had planned, not words she even fully understood. They poured out of her like water over smooth stones. Light flow, heal. At first, nothing happened. The judge sat stiff, her face a mask of skepticism. Her eyes flickered from the child's closed lids to the small trembling lips to the soft light of the fire. But then, faint, so faint Rachel almost thought it a trick of the fire, Mia's hands began to warm. Not the ordinary warmth of skin against skin, but a steady pulse, a thrum, as if something alive moved beneath her palms. Rachel's breath caught. "No," she muttered under her breath. Her instinct bristled, her walls rose. She clenched her jaw and tried to pull her hands back, but Mia's grip, gentle though it was, held her. "Don't fight," Mia whispered, eyes still closed. "Please just believe." The judge's heart hammered, her mind screamed at her, nonsense, child's play, tricks of imagination. But the warmth grew stronger. It crept up her arms, a tingling that made her skin prickle. It reached her chest where her heart beat wild and unsteady. Rachel gasped, wrenching her hands away as if burned. "Stop." Mia's eyes flew open, wide with alarm. Did you feel it?" The judge wheeled back hard, putting space between them. "Enough." "But..." "I said enough," her voice cracked like a whip, echoing through the vast study. Her chest rose and fell sharply, fear and anger twisting her face. Mia's eyes filled with tears, but she did not move. "You felt it, I know you did." The judge pointed toward the doors. "Go back to your room." Mia stayed kneeling, her voice trembling but firm. "You don't want to believe because if you do, it means you were wrong, and you've never allowed yourself to be wrong." Rachel's jaw clenched, the truth of the words pierced deeper than she wanted to admit. Her voice dropped low, almost a growl. "Leave, now." Mia rose slowly, wiping her eyes with the back of her sleeve. "I'll come again tomorrow, you can't stop what's already begun." The judge's eyes flashed with rage. "If you come near me again, I'll have you sent out of this house before morning." Mia's voice was quiet but unyielding. "You won't." For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them, two wills locked, one young and fragile, the other old and iron. Finally, Mia turned and walked to the doors. They shut softly behind her. Judge Rachel sat frozen, her chest heaving. She stared at her hands, they still tingled faintly. Her legs, useless, lifeless things these past 2 years, ached, not pain exactly, a deep stirring as though something had tried to wake them. She gripped the chair's armrests until her knuckles went white. "No," she whispered to the empty room. "No, no, no." But the trembling in her body betrayed her denial. Mia returned to the guest room and collapsed onto the bed, her whole body trembling. She buried her face in the pillow to muffle the sobs that rose uncontrollably. She had failed, or maybe not failed, but been pushed away by the very person she was meant to help. Yet deep inside she knew, the judge had felt it. That night, her dreams returned stronger. She stood again in the great hall of the mansion, its ceilings stretching higher than the sky. The judge sat in her chair, but this time her face was pale, almost frightened. "You will break me," the judge's voice thundered, though her lips never moved. "No," Mia whispered, "I will heal you." Suddenly, the walls of the mansion groaned. Cracks split the marble, dust falling like rain. The judge's chair trembled, her hands clutching its sides as though the floor itself betrayed her. Mia reached out, her small hands glowing with light, but before she could touch, the judge screamed, not in pain but in terror, and the dream shattered. Mia woke with a start, sweat clinging to her brow, her heart pounded like a drum. She pressed her hands together, whispering into the darkness, "Please don't let me give up." Judge Rachel, too, did not sleep. She sat in her study long after the fire had burned to embers, staring at her hands. She flexed them again and again as though trying to erase the memory of that warmth. It had been real, she couldn't deny it, not entirely. But to believe it. To let a poor black child from the city streets, succeed where the world's finest doctors had failed, to admit that her walls of intellect, power, and pride had been her prison. Her stomach churned, her pride screamed no, but the whisper, the faint, terrifying whisper echoed still, what if she's right? For the first time in years, Judge Rachel Lee found herself afraid. Not of her paralysis, not of weakness, but of hope. Because hope was the one thing she had vowed never to feel again. The mansion slept, but two souls lay awake, one trembling with determination, the other trembling with fear. The first attempt had not healed the judge's body, but it had cracked something far deeper. The wall had not fallen, but for the first time it had begun to shake. The night air was heavy with silence, broken only by the distant whisper of fountains in the mansion gardens. Inside the guest room, Mia sat cross-legged on the bed, staring at the flickering shadows cast by the small lamp. Sleep would not come, though her body begged for it. Her dreams had been too loud, too vivid. She turned her gaze to the notebook on the nightstand. The words stared back like a secret carved in fire. The wall will fall, the heart will see, and the feet will rise again. Her small fingers brushed the page, trembling slightly. She didn't know why she had written it or why the words returned to her each night like a chant, but deep down she knew they weren't just words, they were a promise. The events of the evening replayed in her mind. The way the judge had looked at her, cold as ice yet shaken in some unseen place. The sudden warmth that had spread through Mia's hands, flowing into the judge like water into dry earth. And the way Judge Rachel had yanked her hands back, eyes wide with fear she'd tried to disguise as anger. Mia hugged herself, whispering into the dim room, she felt it, I know she did. The clock struck midnight, its echo carried down the halls, steady and solemn, as if marking the turning of something more than just time. Down the corridor, Judge Rachel Lee sat stiff in her wheelchair, alone in the study. The fire had died to gray embers, but she hadn't moved. Her hands, pale in the dying glow, still tingled faintly. She hated it, hated the memory of that warmth, hated that her heart had jumped like a startled bird. And most of all, she hated that she could not stop thinking about the girl. Her mind replayed Mia's whisper, don't fight, please just believe. Rachel pressed her palms flat against her thighs, her jaw clenched. Believe? The word tasted like ashes. Belief had betrayed her once before and she had vowed never again. Yet she could not deny what had happened. Something had moved inside her legs tonight. A faint stirring, a whisper of life she had not felt in years. She closed her eyes tightly as if to banish the thought. But the image returned anyway, the girl kneeling before her, her hands glowing with warmth, her face lit with childlike determination. Rachel's breath shuddered, she whispered into the silence, what are you doing to me, child? The next day dawned gray, the sky heavy with low clouds. Breakfast passed in silence. The judge refused to meet Mia's eyes. The girl, quiet but steady, stole glances across the long dining table, reading the judge's every shift, every stiff motion. The nurse kept the air rigid, moving about with clinking dishes and clipped footsteps. After the meal, the judge ordered her chair wheeled back to the study. She gave no word to Mia, no invitation, no dismissal. It was as if she wanted to pretend last night had never happened. But Mia knew better. That evening, as the clock neared 9 again, Mia stood outside the double doors of the study. Her heart pounded so loud she feared it might betray her presence. She raised a trembling hand to knock, then hesitated. She whispered to herself, don't be afraid, the wall will fall. Then she pushed the doors open without knocking. The fire blazed again, brighter this time, filling the study with a restless glow. Judge Rachel sat where she had before, her hands folded tightly on her lap. Her eyes lifted sharply as Mia entered. I did not call for you, she said coldly. Mia stepped forward, her voice steady despite her shaking knees. I know, but I had to come. The judge's jaw tightened. You are bold, child, boldness can be dangerous. Sometimes boldness is the only way, Mia answered. A silence stretched between them, thick as smoke. The flames cracked, their light painting sharp lines across the judge's face. Finally, Rachel gestured sharply toward the door. Leave me. Mia did not move. No. The judge's eyes flashed. No. I won't leave, not until you let me try again. Rachel's voice sharpened like a blade. Do you defy me in my own house? Mia swallowed hard, but her voice did not falter. I defy the fear that lives in this house, yes. The words hung in the air, startling even herself, but once spoken, she did not take them back. Rachel's grip tightened on the armrests of her chair, her chest rose and fell quickly. You know nothing of fear. I know enough, Mia said softly. I've lived with it, I've slept hungry, I've heard my grandmother cry at night because she can't pay the bills, I've felt people look at me like I don't belong anywhere. I know fear. The judge's lips pressed into a thin line. That is not the same. Then tell me, Mia whispered, stepping closer, what is your fear? Rachel's head snapped back as if struck. You dare. Yes, Mia said simply. Her small hands trembled, but she kept them at her sides. Because you can't heal if you keep hiding behind it. The judge's eyes burned with fury, but beneath the fury something cracked, a flicker of old pain, a shadow of something she had buried deep. She wheeled sharply, turning her chair away from Mia. Her voice low and harsh. You don't understand, belief is dangerous, hope is cruel, I will not be broken again. Mia's voice softened. Hope doesn't break people, losing it does. The judge's shoulders stiffened. Silence. The fire hissed, spitting sparks into the air. Mia moved closer, kneeling again before the chair. Her voice was a whisper, trembling but sure. Please, let me hold your hands again. Rachel's head bowed, her face shadowed. Her fingers twitched on the armrest, caught between refusal and surrender. Finally, with a sharp breath, she thrust her hands forward. Do it, but if nothing happens, you will leave this foolishness behind. Mia nodded, taking the cold hands into her own. She closed her eyes. This time she whispered not only the strange words that came unbidden but also a prayer from her own heart. Light, heal, break the chains. The warmth returned, stronger, steadier, pulsing through her small hands. Rachel gasped, her body jerking slightly. The warmth shot through her arms, into her chest, down into her stomach. And then it reached her legs. A sharp ache cut through them, so sudden she cried out. It was not pain like she remembered. It was deeper, raw, like a wound reopening after being numb for too long. She tried to pull away, but Mia's grip tightened, gentle yet unyielding. Don't fight it, Mia whispered, let it come. Rachel's teeth clenched, tears, hot, furious tears sprang to her eyes. Stop this. You don't hate the feeling, Mia whispered, you hate what it means. Rachel's head shook violently, her breath ragged. You don't know me. Then tell me, Mia begged. Tell me why you're afraid to believe. The judge's chest heaved, her face twisted, torn between fury and anguish, and then, like a dam breaking, the words ripped from her throat. Because I believed once, I believed the doctors when they said the surgery would fix me. I believed the man I loved when he swore he would stay. I believed in God, in justice, in mercy, and every one of them abandoned me. I was left with nothing but this chair and the echo of my own foolish hope. Her voice broke into a sob, raw and jagged. Do you understand now? Hope is a liar, it builds you up just to throw you down harder. Mia's eyes brimmed with tears, but she did not let go of the judge's hands. She whispered through her own, trembling, hope didn't abandon you, people did, doctors did, but hope was the only thing that kept you breathing through it all. The judge shook her head violently, tears spilling down her cheeks. No. Yes, Mia said firmly, her voice rising. You shut hope out because it hurt too much to feel it again, but shutting it out has only chained you tighter. The warmth between their hands pulsed stronger, filling the room with a strange stillness. Rachel gasped, her whole body trembling. She felt it deep in her legs, in the bones she had thought dead. A tingling, a stirring, her heart pounded so wildly she thought it might burst. Mia's voice softened again. The wall is shaking, let it fall. The judge sobbed once, twice, her whole body racked. She tried to pull her hands away again, but this time she couldn't. Not because Mia held them, but because something inside her couldn't let go. Her voice cracked, small and broken, unlike anything she had ever allowed. I'm afraid. Mia squeezed her hands gently. So am I, but that's how we know it's real. For the first time in years, Judge Rachel Lee did not hide her tears. They streamed down her face freely, falling onto her lap like rain. Mia closed her eyes tighter, whispering again, "Light heel rise." The warmth surged, Rachel gasped, her head falling back, her breath catching. Her legs, her dead, useless legs, burned with an ache so sharp it was almost unbearable. She cried out, but she did not pull away. And in that moment something broke. Not her body, not yet. But the wall. The wall she had built of pride and denial, stone by stone, year after year. It cracked, and through the cracks the first rays of hope shone. When at last Mia released her hands, both of them were shaking. Rachel slumped in her chair, her face streaked with tears, her chest heaving. Her eyes, once cold as steel, now looked wide, raw, and unbearably human. Mia whispered softly, "You felt it again." Rachel closed her eyes, a single sob escaped her lips. "Yes." Mia's small hand reached up, brushing the back of the judge's hand gently. "Then we're not done." The judge opened her eyes slowly, staring at the girl kneeling before her. Something inside her had shifted, something she could not deny any longer. For the first time in 2 years, Judge Rachel Lee did not feel only fear when she thought of tomorrow. She felt the faint, terrifying whisper of hope. And she did not push it away. The storm outside rolled low across the sky, its distant thunder like a drumbeat shaking the horizon. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier, drumming against the tall windows of the mansion. The sound filled the study, mingling with the crackling fire. Judge Rachel Lee sat slumped in her chair, her eyes red, her hands trembling faintly. She had wept, truly wept, for the first time in years. The child knelt before her, still, small and quiet, as though waiting for a fragile moment not to shatter. Silence stretched between them, heavy but alive. Rachel's voice finally broke it, low and ragged. "I shouldn't have told you those things." Mia tilted her head. "Why not?" The judge's lips pressed into a thin, trembling line. "Because they are mine, my pain, my shame, not for a child to carry." Mia's voice was soft but steady. "I don't carry it, I only hear it. Sometimes saying it out loud is the first way to let it go." Rachel's jaw worked as if she wanted to argue, but no words came. She turned her face toward the fire, hiding the wet streaks on her cheeks. "You think you understand," she said at last, her voice sharpening again, "but you don't, you cannot. You've lived 12 years, what can you possibly know of the betrayals that carve a soul hollow?" Mia shifted on her knees, folding her hands in her lap. "Maybe not everything, but pain is pain. It doesn't ask how old you are before it knocks on your door." The judge's head turned sharply, her eyes narrowing. The girl's words cut with more precision than any adult's ever had. The rain outside beat harder, rattling the glass. "You want to know why I hate hope?" Rachel asked suddenly, her tone bitter, sharp as glass. "Why I hate believing? Then listen, child, and know it is not just a choice of pride, it is survival." Mia nodded quietly, bracing herself. The judge leaned back, her eyes fixed on the dancing flames. 2 years ago I had everything. The courtroom was my kingdom. People bowed beneath my words. I was feared, respected, untouchable, and beside me I had him, Adrian. Her voice softened on the name, almost breaking. She swallowed hard. "He was the one man who saw me not as a title, not as power, but as a woman. He made me believe in something I had long buried, love, foolish, reckless love. He promised he would stand by me no matter what, even when the accident came, even when the doctors said I would never walk again." Her fists clenched on the armrests, knuckles white. "But do you know what happened? The moment the final verdict was spoken, that I was paralyzed for life, he left. No goodbye, no mercy, a note on the table, gone." Mia's small breath caught. Rachel's voice hardened, bitter fire dripping from each word. "The man who had held me through storms, who had sworn his soul to mine, gone. And the doctors, they had looked me in the eye, swearing there was a chance, swearing surgery would restore me. Lies, everyone. I was left broken, alone, in this chair, and every piece of belief I had left burned to ash." She turned on Mia then, her eyes blazing, her voice rising. "So you tell me, little girl, why should I ever believe again? Why should I ever open that door, only to be betrayed, abandoned, made a fool of again?" The fire roared behind her, shadows sharp against her gaunt face. Her tears shone like steel. Mia's heart thudded painfully, but she did not shrink away. She lifted her chin, her voice trembling but sure. "Because closing that door has only kept you in the dark. You think it protects you, but it's a prison. Belief didn't break you, betrayal did, and hiding from hope only lets the betrayal keep winning." Rachel flinched as though struck. The words hung heavy in the air. The storm outside thundered, shaking the window panes. For a long time neither spoke. Finally, Rachel's voice came again, lower, cracked. "You speak as though you know, but how could you?" Mia looked down at her hands, her small fingers twisting together. "Because my father left too. I was just a baby, but my grandmother told me. My mother, she couldn't take the weight of raising me alone, so she left me with grandma and disappeared. Every birthday, every Christmas, I wished she'd come back, but she never did. I prayed, I believed, and it hurt every year when nothing changed." Her voice faltered, tears filling her eyes. "But if I stopped believing, if I stopped hoping she loved me even a little, then what would be left of me?" The judge's lips parted, her eyes softening despite herself. The girl's words pierced her like needles. Mia wiped her eyes quickly with her sleeve. "Maybe I don't know everything about betrayal, but I know what it feels like to hurt, to wonder if you matter, to feel forgotten, and I know the only thing worse than hope hurting you is never hopping at all." The storm thundered again, echoing her words. Rachel's chest rose and fell sharply. Her hands trembled against the chair's armrests. She wanted to dismiss the child's words, to brush them aside as childish fancy, but something in her heart, a heart she had buried under years of pride, twisted. She whispered hoarsely, "Why do you care, child? Why not leave me to my ruin? Why fight for me?" Mia's eyes lifted, shining with tears but steady as stone. "Because I see you, not the judge everyone fears, not the woman in the chair. I see the part of you that's still alive, still waiting, and I won't give up on that part even if you want me to." Rachel stared at her, stunned into silence. The fire crackled, the storm howled, and between them something fragile but undeniable bloomed. Hope. It terrified Rachel more than anything ever had. She whispered, barely audible, "What if I believe you, child? What if I let myself hope again and it breaks me, what then?" Mia leaned forward, her small hands reaching for the judge's trembling ones. Her voice was steady, gentle, full of a strength far beyond her years. "Then I'll be here to help you stand again, even if it takes 1,000 times." Rachel's breath caught, her throat tightened, her eyes burning fresh with tears she had no strength to fight. For the first time in her life, Judge Rachel Lee did not know what to say. And so, she said nothing. She let the child's hands cover hers. She let the warmth return, pulsing gently into her veins, reaching places she had long thought dead. This time she did not resist. And though her legs did not yet rise, though her body remained in the chair, something inside her shifted irrevocably. The silence she had lived in for 2 years broke. And in its place, the first fragile notes of healing began to play. That night, Mia returned to her room exhausted, her whole body trembling. She lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, whispering into the darkness, "The wall will fall." In the study, Rachel remained before the fire long after the girl had left. She stared at her hands, still tingling faintly, still warm. For the first time, she did not try to deny it. Instead, she whispered into the empty room, her voice breaking like a child. "Please don't let me be a fool again." The storm outside slowly calmed, the rain softening to a gentle patter. The house settled into silence once more. But in the hearts of both judge and child, something had changed. The wall was not gone, but it was crumbling. The next morning, the mansion awoke under a pale gray sky. The storm had passed, leaving the air damp and heavy, the gardens glistening with rain. Birds chirped faintly from the hedges, but inside the great house, silence reigned as always. Judge Rachel Lee sat at the breakfast table, her hands wrapped around a porcelain cup of coffee gone cold. She hadn't touched the food laid out before her. Across the long, polished table, Mia nibbled quietly on a slice of bread, her small eyes watching the judge with a patience that unnerved Rachel more than any courtroom glare ever had. The nurse moved about with her usual stiffness, setting plates and clearing others, pretending not to notice the tension. But she noticed. Everyone did. At last, Rachel pushed her chair back with a sharp motion. "That will be all." The nurse gave a brisk nod and exited. For a long moment, only the clink of silver on porcelain remained as Mia set her bread down. Then, softly, she spoke. "You didn't sleep last night." Rachel's head lifted sharply, her eyes narrowing. "And how would you know that?" Mia shrugged lightly. "Because I didn't either. Sometimes you can feel it when someone else is awake in the same house, like their heart makes noise in the dark." The judge's lips pressed into a thin line, but her gaze faltered. The girl wasn't wrong. Rachel wheeled herself away from the table, her voice clipped. Come, if you insist on haunting me, then at least let us face it in the study. Mia slid from her chair and followed, her small footsteps echoing across the marble halls. The fire burned low when they entered, only embers glowing red. Rachel did not ask for more wood. Instead, she stopped her chair in the middle of the vast study and stared at the empty hearth, her back to the girl. For a long silence, nothing moved but the dust motes swirling in the pale morning light. Finally, Rachel's voice came low and sharp. You think I built these walls around me out of pride, that I sit in this chair because I am too stubborn to feel? You are wrong. Mia tilted her head. Then why? The judge's hands tightened on the armrests, veins standing stark against her pale skin. Because pride was all I had left. When everything else was torn from me, pride was the last stone that held me upright. If I let that fall, then what remains? Mia stepped closer, her eyes soft but steady. You remain, not the judge, not the pride, you. Rachel's head snapped toward her, eyes flashing. And who am I without those things? Do you know what they call me when I am not on the bench? A broken woman in a chair, a shadow of what she was. They whisper it when they think I cannot hear. Her voice cracked, sharp with pain. Do you think I could bear that, child? To let them see me weak, to let them look at me with pity, I would sooner die. The words rang through the study like steel against stone. Mia's throat tightened, but she did not step back. Then maybe that's why you've never let anyone help you, because help looks like weakness to you. The judge's face darkened, but the truth of the words cut deeper than any insult could. Mia's small voice softened, but sometimes letting someone help is the bravest thing you can do. Silence. Rachel turned away, her chest heaving. For a long time, neither spoke. The fire hissed faintly as another ember cracked. Finally, Rachel's voice came again, quieter now, almost a whisper. When I was a girl, I was taught never to cry. My father said tears were for the weak. He was a soldier, hard as iron. My mother, she tried to soften him, but he broke her spirit too. And so I learned strength is silence, pride is armor, tears are death. Her hands trembled faintly on the chair. I rose in the world because of that. I built walls taller than any man could climb. I became a judge who bent for no one, and it worked until the day I fell. Mia's eyes filled, her heart aching for the woman before her. And when you fell, there was no one to catch you. The judge's breath caught. For a moment, her face twisted with something raw, unguarded. She looked away sharply, but not before Mia saw the truth flicker in her eyes. No one, Rachel whispered. The silence after was heavy, not empty but full of all the years the judge had carried that weight alone. Mia stepped forward, placing her small hand on the armrest of the wheelchair. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. The judge stared down at that tiny hand, dark against the polished wood, trembling but steady. Something inside her chest ached, a deep ache she had buried for decades. Her voice broke, softer than a breath. Why you, why a child, why now? Mia's eyes lifted, shining with tears but unyielding. Because sometimes it takes someone who hasn't learned how to stop believing, someone small enough to slip through the cracks in the walls you built. The judge's throat worked as she swallowed hard, her eyes burned. You speak as though you were sent. Mia did not flinch. Maybe I was. The words hung in the air, heavy with something neither of them could explain. For the first time, Rachel did not push them away. The hours passed slowly. They sat in the study together, one in a wheelchair, one on the rug beside it. They did not speak much more, but the silence was different now, not empty, not hostile, a silence that held space for something fragile, something new. At last Mia spoke again. May I try once more? Rachel hesitated, her hands trembled faintly, but she did not say no. Instead, she extended her hands slowly, almost reluctantly, as though afraid of what they might feel again. Mia clasped them gently, her small fingers warm against the judge's cold skin. She closed her eyes, whispering once more, "Light, heal, rise." The warmth came quickly this time, pulsing steady and strong. It flowed into Rachel's arms, her chest down into her legs. She gasped, her whole body trembling. Her legs ached again, sharper now, as though muscles long dead were being forced awake. The sensation was unbearable, and yet she could not let go. Tears spilled down her face, her voice cracked, raw and broken. It hurts. Mia's grip tightened. Because they're waking up, don't stop, don't run from it. The judge sobbed, shaking her head, but she did not pull away. The warmth grew, the ache deepened until she thought she might scream. And then suddenly it eased. The fire in her legs softened to a low, steady hum. A presence she could not explain filled her chest, light and heavy all at once. She slumped forward, breathless, her tears falling freely. Mia opened her eyes slowly, her own face damp with sweat. You felt it again. The judge nodded, unable to speak. This time there was no denial, no anger, only the trembling truth of what she could no longer ignore. The wall inside her had not just cracked, a piece of it had fallen away entirely. And through the broken place, light poured in. That night, Rachel did not sleep again. She sat by her window, staring out at the moonlit gardens. For the first time in 2 years, she flexed her toes, just faintly, just barely, but they moved. Her breath hitched, a sob broke from her throat. She covered her mouth with her hands, shaking uncontrollably. It was real. It was happening. And the thought terrified her more than anything else ever had. Because hope once banished had returned. And this time she could not push it away. The night passed without sleep. Judge Rachel Lee sat rigid in her wheelchair near the tall window, the moon painting her pale face with silver light. Her eyes were fixed on her feet, bare against the rug, toes curled slightly, a movement so small, so fragile, yet more powerful than any verdict she had ever delivered. She had not wept like that in decades, she had not dared to believe, and now her heart trembled between terror and wonder. When dawn's gray light crept through the curtains, Mia was already awake, curled up in the armchair across the room, watching her. She had not slept either, her small body weary but her spirit bright. You moved them, Mia whispered almost reverently. Rachel pressed her lips together, her breath unsteady. Yes. Mia's face lit, but she did not speak. She knew the weight of this moment, knew that words could shatter the fragile thread of belief still forming in the woman before her. For a long time, silence held them both. Finally, Rachel turned her chair toward the girl, her face pale but her eyes blazing with something fierce. Help me. Mia stood at once, padding across the rug. Help you how? The judge's jaw tightened. I must try. Mia's breath caught. Try standing. Rachel nodded, the word caught in her throat. They moved to the center of the room. The air seemed heavier there, as though the walls themselves leaned in to watch. Rachel's hands gripped the wooden arms of her wheelchair so tightly her knuckles whitened. Sweat dotted her brow, though the room was cool. Mia placed her small hands over the judge's trembling ones. Don't rush, just breathe. Rachel closed her eyes, sucking in a sharp breath. She hadn't attempted this in years, not once since the doctors had told her the truth. Your legs are finished, you will never walk again. Her heart thundered, her pride screamed at her to stop, to remain in control, unshaken, untouchable. But another voice rose beneath it now, softer but stronger. Try. She shifted forward, bracing herself. Pain shot through her thighs, searing and sharp. She hissed, biting down hard on her lip. You're okay, Mia murmured. The pain means they're alive again. Rachel swallowed a cry, her arms trembling as she pushed against the rests. Slowly, agonizingly, her body rose an inch, then 2. Her knees quivered, her legs, frail and stubborn, bore weight they hadn't carried in years. For a single staggering heartbeat, she was half standing. A sob tore from her throat. She collapsed back into the chair, shaking violently. Her chest heaved, her hands clutching the armrests as though the earth itself were tilting beneath her. Mia dropped to her knees beside her, eyes wide, voice urgent but gentle. You did it, Judge Lee, you did it. But Rachel shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, it was nothing, a trick, just momentum. Her pride clawed desperately for denial, but the truth glowed hot and undeniable in her trembling legs. You stood, Mia said firmly, her voice steady as stone. Don't pretend it didn't happen, I saw it, you felt it. The judge buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. She had not allowed herself such weakness in decades, but the tears came anyway, not just grief but terror. Because hope had returned, and hope was dangerous. The next days blurred into something new. Each morning, Mia returned to the study, coaxing the judge into small, painful attempts. At first, Rachel resisted, but the girl's persistence was iron wrapped in softness. Slowly, reluctantly, the judge gave in. And with each attempt, something changed. Her feet flexed more firmly, her legs trembled longer before buckling. The fire of pain remained, but beneath it strength stirred, the faint hum of muscles awakening from long sleep. The nurse began to notice, though she said nothing aloud. She lingered in doorways longer, her eyes flicking to the judge's legs with disbelief she dared not voice. Rachel caught her once and their eyes locked. For the first time, the nurse looked not at a broken woman in a chair, but at something else entirely, something rising. It terrified Rachel more than she would admit. One evening, as the sun bled gold through the windows, Mia sat cross-legged on the floor, her gaze fixed on the judge's face. "You're afraid," she said simply. Rachel's lips thinned. "Of course I am. To hope is to invite ruin. If I believe in this and it vanishes, I will not survive it." Mia shook her head. "Maybe hope isn't the enemy. Maybe it's the rope pulling you out of the pit you've been in all this time." The judge stared at her, her jaw tight, her heart aching. Mia's voice softened. "You spent your whole life judging others, but now you're judging yourself too harshly. Maybe it's time to show yourself mercy." The words struck deep, slicing through years of armor. For a moment, Rachel's face crumpled. She turned her head sharply, but not before Mia saw the tears glittering in her eyes. That night, alone in her chamber, Rachel tried again. No Mia, no nurse, no witness, just herself and the dark. Her fingers dug into the armrests, she inhaled, braced, and pushed. Her legs screamed with effort, but they lifted her again, higher this time. For 3 full heartbeats she stood. Her knees wobbled, her breath caught, she could hardly believe it. And then she fell, not into the chair, but onto the rug. The impact jolted her body, pain shooting through her arms and hip. She groaned, sprawled across the floor. For a terrible moment, shame swallowed her. She was a woman of dignity, lying like a fallen child on the carpet. But then her lips trembled, a sound escaped her chest. A laugh. Soft, shaky, but real. Because for the first time in years she had fallen not from helplessness, but from trying. And that fall meant more than any verdict she had ever written. At dawn, the nurse found her still on the rug, her eyes red from tears but her face carrying something new, something lighter. Rachel met her startled gaze calmly. "Do not fetch the chair, I will rise from here myself." And for the first time, the nurse obeyed. The news spread quietly through the house, though no one dared voice it aloud. The judge was moving again. Something impossible was happening. And with each passing day, the impossible drew closer to becoming truth. The house had grown quieter in recent days, though not from emptiness. It was the hush of reverence, of waiting. Servants moved with lighter steps, whispers carried in hallways, and even the grandfather clock seemed to chime with a deeper note. Everyone sensed it. Something unseen was stirring in Judge Rachel Lee's mansion. And at the heart of it stood a 12-year-old girl, and a woman who had once sworn never to hope again. That morning, sunlight spilled into the study in golden waves. The fire was unlit, the hearth cold, yet warmth filled the air nonetheless. Mia stood barefoot on the rug, her plain dress brushing her knees. Her hands were clasped together, not in fear but in fierce prayer. She was ready. The nurse stood by the door, her stiff composure cracked, her eyes uncertain. For weeks she had served in silence, watching. Today she could no longer pretend. Judge Rachel sat in her chair, dressed not in her usual dark silks but in a simple blouse and skirt. Something about her looked different, not younger, not weaker, but lighter. She exhaled, long and slow, and fixed her gaze on Mia. "Today it ends, one way or another." Mia nodded. "Yes, today the wall falls." The judge almost smiled, almost. They began as always, Mia kneeling, taking the judge's hands into her own. Her palms were warm, steady. She whispered softly, not magic words, not incantations, but something truer: "Rise, heal, live." Rachel closed her eyes, her breath unsteady. She could feel it now without doubt, the warmth flowing from the child's hands into her own, spreading through her arms, down her chest, seeping into her legs. Not pain this time, but power. Her knees tingled, her calves trembled, she sucked in a sharp breath. Mia whispered again, "Stand with me." The judge's heart slammed against her ribs. Slowly, with a groan of effort, she pressed her palms into the rests and pushed. Her body rose inch by agonizing inch, her legs quivering violently. She gasped, her knees screaming, her breath coming fast. But she did not fall. For the first time in years, Judge Rachel Lee stood tall, her head level with the mantel, her body trembling but upright. The nurse let out a sharp cry, her hands flying to her mouth. Tears blurred Rachel's vision, the world tilted, her pride shook, and yet she was standing. Her lips parted, her voice hoarse, "I'm up." Mia's eyes glowed, "You're not just up, you're ready." The girl stepped back slightly, still holding her hands out. "Now take a step." The words landed like a thunderclap. Rachel's breath caught. A step? The thought seemed impossible. Her whole life for 2 years had been wheels and stone, never motion. The idea of lifting a foot forward was like asking her to fly. "I can't," she whispered, fear twisting her gut. "Yes, you can," Mia said firmly. "Don't let the wall trick you, it's already crumbling." Rachel shook her head, panic rising. "If I fall?" "You've already fallen," Mia said gently, "but this time you'll rise." The nurse moved forward, trembling. "My lady, please don't risk." Rachel snapped her gaze to her, her voice fierce. "No, do not hold me back." The nurse froze, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Rachel turned back to Mia. The girl's hands were outstretched, steady, waiting. "Trust me," Mia whispered. Rachel's chest heaved, she closed her eyes, and then, with a sound that was half a sob, half a laugh, she shifted her weight. Her right foot lifted from the rug, her balance wavered, her knees shrieked, but then the foot came down. One step. Her whole body jolted as though struck by lightning. She gasped, clutching the air. Her voice cracked, "I did it." Mia's face lit like dawn itself. "Do it again." The judge stared down, her breath shaking. Slowly she dragged her left foot forward, her body quivered, sweat pouring, but the foot landed. 2 steps. The nurse let out a sob. She pressed her hands to her chest, whispering prayers she had not spoken in years. Rachel stumbled, nearly collapsing, but Mia darted forward, her small hands steadying the trembling giant before her. "Don't look down," Mia urged, "look at me." The judge's eyes locked on the girl. For the first time there was no coldness, no disdain, only naked fear and fragile hope. One more step, then another. 4, 5, 6. By the time she reached the edge of the rug, Judge Rachel was sobbing openly, her body collapsing forward into Mia's arms. The child held her, impossibly strong, steadying her like a pillar of faith. "I'm walking," the judge gasped. "Dear God, I'm walking." Her knees buckled and she sank to the rug, trembling, clutching Mia as though the girl were air itself. The nurse rushed forward, falling beside them, tears wetting her cheeks. "It's a miracle, a miracle." But Mia only smiled, wiping the judge's tears with her small hand. "Not a miracle, a promise kept." The days that followed were unlike anything the mansion had ever known. The judge, once a woman of ice and steel, now moved through the halls with shaky but growing strength, Mia always at her side. Her first unassisted step came a week later, her first walk across the study 3 weeks. The doctors, summoned in disbelief, could only gape, their science failing them utterly. But to Mia none of that mattered, she had seen it from the start. The wall had fallen. On a quiet evening the two sat together by the fire, no wheelchairs between them. The judge's legs were weak but alive, her spirit raw but free. She turned to Mia, her voice soft but unshakable. "You saved me." Mia shook her head. "No, you saved yourself, I just reminded you how." For a long moment they simply looked at each other, woman and child, judge and girl, past and future. Rachel reached for Mia's hand, this time not with reluctance but with gratitude. "You made me believe again," she whispered, "and that is the greatest miracle of all." Mia smiled, her eyes glistening. "Then never stop." That night the mansion did not feel heavy, it did not feel haunted by silence or pride. It felt alive. And in the great hall where shadows once stretched long and dark, a new sound rang out. The sound of footsteps. Fragile, trembling but steady. Each one carrying the truth the world would soon know. 20 doctors could not make the paralyzed judge walk. But a poor 12-year-old black girl did. And nothing in the mansion or in their hearts would ever be the same again.